destigmatizing emergencies, starting with autism. With that being said, welcome to RAW-tism, a podcast about my autistic experience and opinions on the world. On this podcast, I will be raw and unfiltered. Whether you listen to enjoy, hate listen, or just leave it playing on mute to support me, I appreciate the effort you put into my little program. Thank you! You're always welcome to disagree with me as long as you do so respectfully and with no name-calling. I love you all! If you enjoy this podcast, please consider rating and reviewing RAW-tism to help others find me. Ensure you're following RAW-tism on your preferred podcast streaming service so you never miss an episode. We post a new episode every Monday, but you never know when we'll throw in a special treat during the week. This episode of RAW-tism discusses the behavioral expectations and gender norms within a society. Big obstacle that I struggled with growing up as an undiagnosed neurodivergent child was the expectations that were placed on me from the get-go. Since social difficulties are prevalent with autism, I struggled more than the average child. With my disability being invisible and unknown to even myself, I was expected to act typical within my age group. With ADHD, most teachers were taught to look for young white males who show an excess of energy and difficulty following directions. They would miss the inattentive girl who hyper-focused on reading whatever book joined her that week. I would hide my books how other kids snuck in cell phones and read whenever teachers were talking because it was something I could easily focus on. I read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for fun in 7th grade and loved it. The school librarian asked me for the 3 weeks I borrowed that book if I'd prefer to pick something more my age. It was one of the books the library at my grade school had simply to make the area more academic. They didn't expect someone like me to actually be interested in reading Jules Verne. When I started reading the Jedi Quest series, the librarian stopped trying to help me find books with more girly topics. I think she realized by that point I wasn't the typical student she was used to. It wasn't like I was better or more interesting than the average girl. I was just me. On the contrary, more people avoided me because of my weirdness. Instead of the not like other girls romantic trope, I was the horse girl who could only talk about horses. In that analogy, Pokemon was my horse. The most significant memory I have from 6th grade was being accused of showing off for the boys in my class when I brought in a Pokemon handbook that came along with the first generation of the television series. I was just interested in learning about the different types of Pokemon. I wasn't trying to catch anyone's attention. I'd get annoyed when anyone of any gender attempted to talk to me while I was reading. One girl told me that her favorite character in the Pokemon show was Pokemon. Pokemon is not a character name. It's like saying animal. It describes a collection of species, not an individual. I still bristle remembering that conversation. If you don't know about something, don't pretend. Just admit it. It's not that big of a deal. It's so much more annoying when you pretend to know things you don't. Growing up, I was always either too loud or too quiet. I failed to live up to society's expectations regarding communication, personal space, eye contact, and attention. I couldn't tell when people were disinterested in the topics I was blabbing about I couldn't tell when people were disinterested in the topics I was blabbing about and struggled with any significant relationships outside of family. By 5th grade, I was reading at a college level, but couldn't make any friends who were more than acquaintances until I was in college. Working in group projects, I would fix other people's work, and it got to the point that I would do the whole project in high school while the rest of the group took credit. I was never able to advocate for myself or tell anyone about my struggles. If you know me at all, you know I love skulls. I have so many, including this one. Oh, there's another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, another one, another one, another one, another one, another one. More in there and other there. So many schools. But none of these are convenient to take on the go. Thankfully, there's skulljewelry.com. They have the finest collection of skull-themed jewelry and other products with similar vibes. They're affordable and often have sales for additional deals. Want to represent the skull-loving community? Go to the link in the description or my bio to check them out. Skulljewelry.com. Jewelry, gear, and apparel forged by American grit. A great example of my lack of understanding of social norms was sports. I've never really been a sports fan. And I've never really been a sports fan. And I didn't understand why people were so into the scores and stats of different teams. I watched the Super Bowl for the funny commercials and party foods my dad would buy. The static of an unconnected cable box was more entertaining to me than watching sports. I would have brought a book to every baseball game my dad would take me to if he had let me. At the very least, I got nachos, which are always a plus. Gotta love nachos. I've always loved nachos. I understand the excitement of sports now that I'm older and see how monotonous adult life gets. Having something to root for that doesn't substantially affect your life is comforting to those stuck in the same routine. I still don't watch sports, but I am much more likely to listen to people gush about their favorite teams and players. I still don't like sports, but I'm much more likely to listen to people gush about their favorite teams and players, just like I wish someone had done for me when I was obsessed with Pokemon. A big thing about neurodivergent diagnoses is that once we have an explanation for the differences in our behaviors, we can work to find a compromise. I can't tell how loud my voice is, and I used to overstimulate others all the time. Once I learned about auditory processing disorder, I started training myself to focus on the vibrations in my throat. This way, I could know how loud I was getting by how strong the vibrations were. I didn't stop being myself, and I didn't assimilate into society. But I found ways to coexist with this world that's not made for who I was. Others have to make compromises as well for this to work. That's what accommodations are. I won't yell out the answer to a rhetorical question in class, and in exchange, I get a copy of the professor's lecture notes ahead of time to help me understand and follow along better. It isn't an exact science. We don't sit down at a table and work out a contract. This is just the way I was choosing to explain the idea. The big thing about accommodations, though, is that most educational establishments and places of work require proof of diagnosis documentation to provide anything more than anyone else would get. This is an issue. I didn't get any accommodations until the second semester of my sophomore year of college when I was diagnosed with PTSD and OCD. I got my most helpful accommodation in my last year of college after I had received my autism and ADHD diagnoses. If I had these accommodations from the get-go, I would have had a much better experience in school. My mental health wouldn't have gotten to the dangerous levels of unwellness, and I could have used that potential that teachers always felt I was wasting. I have always been intelligent and clever. With the right help, I could have done much better without sacrificing my inner peace. This is the reason behind my company, Archlink LLC. I want to advocate for every child to get the accommodations they need regardless of diagnoses. Familial status, or IQ. No one deserves to feel beaten down by the school system. It's supposed to bring students up. I'm fighting to change that. Thank you. I'll step down from my soapbox, and here is the pre-recorded outro.
Always, I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm not even here to tell you what or how to think. I'm here to share the autistic experience with you, from someone who is studying for their graduate certification in autism spectrum disorder, someone who, for the first 22 years of their life, was under the impression that they were allistic, and as somebody who since September 30th, 2022, has finally found their place in the world. I am autistic. I'm a part of the autistic community, and I'm proud of it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Regardless of your thoughts and feelings toward me, I would love for every one of you. You are wanted by many, you are loved by many, and so many want you to stay in this world. I am one of these many's and always will be. If you'd like to support this podcast, the description includes links with referral codes to Circles water bottles, Pair Eyewear's customizable glasses, and my favorite Amazon products. The transcript for this episode can be found for free on my Patreon, which is also linked below. Would you like to see more of me? In that case, visit EmKayArchlink.com for links to my other content. A new episode of RAW-tism comes out every Monday wherever you get your podcasts. Next week's episode of RAW-tism is posted on Patreon every Tuesday, ad-free and unedited. Karaoke videos are posted on Patreon every Thursday. Lastly, my book Unseen Powers is available in hardback, paperback, or digitally through Amazon. Remember to drink water, eat some